The afternoon sun blazed through the glass doors of First Community Bank as Marcus Green stepped inside, his weathered hands clutching a check for $50,000. It was the largest harvest check he'd ever earned in 23 years of farming. The bank lobby hummed with the quiet efficiency of a weekday afternoon, tellers processing transactions behind polished counters. Customers waiting in orderly lines. Marcus wore his Sunday best, pressed khakis, a crisp white shirt, polished boots. He'd rehearsed this moment in his mind all morning. But when branch manager Bradford Collins glanced up from his desk through the glass office walls and saw Marcus approach the counter, his expression hardened. What followed in the next 10 minutes would shake the foundation of this small southern town. Collins would snatch the cash Marcus had brought for his initial deposit, count it with theatrical disgust, then throw the bills onto the marble floor with a sneer. The scattered 20s and 50s lay between them like fallen dignity. Every customer in the lobby froze. Marcus knelt slowly, gathering each bill with trembling fingers, his jaw set, his eyes burning with controlled fury. He would remember this moment. So would everyone else. Because 15 minutes later, a black sedan with corporate plates would pull into the parking lot, and Bradford Collins' world would come crashing down. Riverside was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where 3 generations might work at the same textile mill, where Sunday services at First Baptist could predict Monday's gossip. Population, 8,400. Main Street had a hardware store that still used carbon copy receipts, a diner famous for pecan pie, and First Community Bank, which had anchored the corner of Main and Oak since 1952. Marcus Green had lived in Riverside his entire life. His grandfather had sharecropped the same land Marcus now owned outright, 300 acres of rich bottomland along the Chatham River. Over 2 decades, Marcus had transformed those fields through sheer determination, crop rotation knowledge, and an almost spiritual understanding of soil composition. This year, his barley crop had exceeded every expectation. Golden waves of grain had rippled across his fields like an ocean, and when the harvest trucks rolled in, the yield numbers made even the agricultural extension agent shake his head in amazement. The check from Pemberton Grain Company represented not just money, but validation, $50,000. Marcus had done the math 100 times. After expenses, loan payments, and setting aside next year's seed money, he'd have enough to finally renovate the old farmhouse, maybe even help his son with law school expenses. His son, Daniel, was in his second year at Emory University School of Law in Atlanta, the first Green to attend graduate school. Every Sunday evening, they talked on the phone. Daniel would share stories about constitutional law and civil procedure, while Marcus would update him on soil moisture levels and fertilizer schedules. Different worlds, same dedication, but Riverside still carried shadows of its past. The town had integrated its schools in 1971, 15 years late. The country club hadn't admitted its first black member until 1998, and only after threatened litigation. Progress came slowly here, measured in generations rather than years. Most people were polite, cordial even. But underneath the surface civility, old assumptions remained, quiet and persistent as termites in old wood. Bradford Collins embodied those assumptions. 46 years old, Collins had managed First Community's Riverside branch for 8 years. He drove a silver Mercedes, belonged to the Rotary Club, and served on the hospital board. His wife, Patricia, ran the junior league. His daughter was homecoming queen at Riverside High. To most of the town, Collins represented success, stability, respectability. But Marcus had heard stories. Other black business owners whispered about Collins's attitude, the way he scrutinized their applications more carefully, asked more invasive questions, suggested they might be more comfortable at other institutions. Nothing you could quite put your finger on, nothing explicit enough to complain about. Just a pattern, subtle and deniable. Marcus had banked at First Community for 15 years, keeping his checking account and farm operating loan there. His previous interactions had been with other loan officers, other tellers. He'd never had direct business with Collins. Until today, Marcus pushed through the heavy glass door at 2:47 p.m. The air conditioning wrapped around him like a cold handshake. He approached the reception desk, where Jennifer Harper, a young teller he recognized from church, sat reviewing documents. "Good afternoon, Jennifer," Marcus said, his voice warm and steady. Jennifer looked up, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, followed by something else. Discomfort, maybe. "Oh, hello, Mr. Green. How can I help you today? I'd like to make a deposit and discuss some account options. I have a substantial check from this year's harvest." He placed the check on the counter carefully, like it might shatter. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly at the amount. "That's wonderful, Mr. Green. Let me just. I'll need to get Mr. Collins for this. Large deposits require manager approval. Her voice carried an apologetic note. Of course, Marcus said. I understand procedure. She disappeared into the back office. Through the glass partition, Marcus could see her speaking to Collins, whose desk faced the lobby. Collins glanced toward Marcus, and his expression shifted. Not quite a frown, but a tightening around the eyes, a subtle straightening of his shoulders. Marcus waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Other customers came and went, their transactions processed smoothly. An elderly white woman deposited her pension check. A young couple opened a savings account. The clock on the wall ticked toward 3 o'clock. Finally, Collins emerged from his office, Jennifer trailing behind him like an uncertain shadow. Collins was tall, with carefully styled silver hair, and a navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly farm expenses. His American flag lapel pin caught the fluorescent light. Mr. Green, is it? Collins's voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes were cold. Jennifer says you have a deposit to make. Yes, sir, I do. Marcus extended his hand. Collins looked at it for a beat too long before shaking it limply. I'd like to deposit this check and perhaps discuss some investment options. Collins took the check, holding it between 2 fingers as if it might contaminate him. Pemberton Grain Company. $50,000. He looked up sharply. That's a substantial amount. What exactly is the nature of your relationship with Pemberton? They buy my barley crop, Marcus said simply. Have for the past 6 years. And this represents what? Your annual income. This year's harvest payment, yes sir. Collins studied the check more closely, holding it up to the light. I'll need to verify this, of course. We can't just accept checks of this size without proper authentication. I understand, Marcus said, though he'd never heard of such requirements when the Hartley farm deposited their considerably larger wheat harvest checks. I brought all my documentation. Harvest records, the delivery receipts, the purchase agreement. Collins barely glanced at the papers Marcus offered. Why don't you step into my office, Mr. Green? We'll need to have a more thorough conversation about this. Number Part 3, The Confrontation. Collins's office was aggressively corporate. Framed certificates lined one wall, banking credentials, civic awards, a photo of Collins shaking hands with the state governor. The desk was large and imposing, its surface nearly empty except for a leather desk pad and a bronze nameplate. Bradford J. Collins, branch manager. Marcus sat in the chair across from the desk, his documentation folder in his lap. Collins settled into his high-backed leather chair, the check still held between his fingers. So, Mr. Green, Collins began, leaning back with studied casualness. Tell me about your farming operation. I have 300 acres along the Chatham River, Marcus explained. Primarily barley, some rotation with soybeans. I've been farming that land for 23 years. And you own this land outright? I have a mortgage, yes, but I've owned the farm for. Who holds the mortgage? Collins interrupted. First Community Bank does. Has for 12 years. Collins pulled up something on his computer, his fingers clicking across the keyboard. Interesting. Your loan history shows some late payments. 2019, 2020, 2021. Those were drought years, Marcus said, keeping his voice level. I communicated with the loan department each time. We worked out payment plans. Everything was resolved, and I've been current for 3 years straight. Nevertheless, it shows a pattern of financial instability. Collins set the check down on his desk, but didn't release it. Mr. Green, I'm sure you understand that we have to be very careful about large cash deposits. There are federal regulations, anti-money laundering protocols. This isn't cash, sir. It's a check from a legitimate agricultural business. Even so. Collins steepled his fingers. $50,000 is an unusual amount for a small farming operation. Perhaps you could explain to me, in detail, exactly how He paused, and the pause was deliberate, weighted with insinuation. How a farm your size generates this level of income. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I practice intensive soil management. I use precision agriculture techniques. I invested in better seed varieties. My yield per acre this year was 43% above county average. 43%. Collins's smile didn't reach his eyes. That seems improbable, Mr. Green. Frankly, it seems suspicious. Suspicious? The word hung in the air between them. I've been in banking for 20 years. I know farming economics. These numbers don't add up. Collins tapped the check. I'm not comfortable processing this deposit without further investigation. I'll need to contact Pemberton directly, verify the check's authenticity, review your entire account history, possibly require an audit of your farm records. An audit? For depositing my own legitimately earned money? I'm simply following proper procedure, Mr. Green. Collins's tone had shifted to something harder, more openly hostile. You see, we have standards at this institution. We can't just accept large sums of money from anyone who walks in off the street, particularly when the source of funds seems questionable. Marcus stood slowly, his hands gripping the folder so tightly the cardboard bent. Mr. Collins, I've been a customer of this bank for 15 years. I've paid every loan payment, every fee. That check represents a year of work, dawn to dusk, 7 days a week. There is nothing questionable about it. Collins stood as well, and now his mask of professionalism cracked completely. You know what I think, Mr. Green? I think you should take your business elsewhere. Somewhere more suited to your situation. This bank serves professionals, business owners, respectable families. I don't know where you really got this money, and I don't frankly care to find out. But I'm not going to risk this institution's reputation by processing suspicious deposits. The room felt airless. Marcus stared at Collins, and in that moment, he saw everything clearly. The contempt. The assumption. The casual certainty that he could say these things without consequence. I want to make my deposit, Marcus said quietly. I'm a customer. I have rights. Collins laughed, actually laughed. Rights? Let me tell you something. He picked up the check, held it up. You come in here with your little farm check, acting like you're some kind of agricultural mogul. But I see through it. I see exactly what this is. Then, in a gesture so casual it seemed almost choreographed, Collins tore the check in half. Marcus's breath stopped. Oops, Collins said, not quite smiling. Looks like this check is damaged. You'll have to get Pemberton to issue a new one. In the meantime, I suggest you find another bank. One that specializes in your kind of clientele. He dropped the torn pieces on the desk. Marcus's hands trembled as he gathered the pieces. His throat felt tight, words damming up behind his teeth. Every instinct screamed at him to respond, to fight back, to make this man understand the magnitude of what he'd just done. But another voice, older and wiser, his grandfather's voice, whispered, Asterisk. Not here. Not now. Let him dig his own grave. Asterisk. I'll be back, Marcus said quietly. With another check. And we'll see what happens then. Don't bother, Collins said. You're no longer welcome at this institution. Marcus turned to leave Collins's office, but the manager wasn't finished. Collins followed him out into the lobby, his voice rising deliberately so everyone could hear. And just so we're clear, Mr. Green, Collins announced loudly, any future attempts to conduct business here will be met with the same response. We don't serve people who bring suspicious funds into this bank. The lobby had 6 customers and 3 tellers. Every eye turned toward them. Jennifer Harper stood frozen at her station, her face pale. An elderly man waiting in line adjusted his glasses uncomfortably. 2 women by the new accounts desk whispered to each other. Marcus kept walking, each step measured, refusing to rush. Refusing to show the humiliation burning through his chest. But then Collins did something that would haunt him. From his pocket, he pulled out his money clip, extracted several bills, and threw them on the floor in front of Marcus. Here, Collins said. Since you seem desperate for money, why don't you take these? Maybe you can buy seeds or whatever it is you actually do on that farm. The $20 and $10 bills fluttered to the marble floor, scattered around Marcus's boots. The lobby went completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush. Marcus stood very still, looking at the money on the ground. Then, slowly, he knelt. His knees cracked as they bent. He picked up each bill, one at a time, smoothing them carefully before placing them on the counter. I don't need your money, Mr. Collins, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby. I earned my own. And I'll remember this. Every single moment of it. Jennifer Harper had tears in her eyes. Her hand moved almost unconsciously toward her phone in her pocket, then pulled back, uncertain. An older gentleman, probably in his 70s, stepped forward. Bradford, that's enough. This is disgraceful. Collins whirled on him. Mr. Patterson, with all due respect, this is my bank. I'll run it as I see fit. It's not your bank, Patterson said quietly. It's a community institution. And what you just did was shameful. Then perhaps you'd like to take your business elsewhere as well, Collins snapped. The threat hung in the air. Patterson pressed his lips together but said nothing more. Marcus placed the last bill on the counter, then walked toward the door. His hands were steady, his head high, but inside he felt something breaking apart and reforming into something harder. Sharper. As he pushed through the glass doors into the afternoon heat, he heard Collins's voice behind him. "That's right. Walk away. That's what your kind does best." Marcus sat in his truck for 5 full minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. The torn check pieces lay on the passenger seat. Around him, Riverside went about its ordinary Thursday afternoon. A mother pushed a stroller down the sidewalk. A delivery truck rumbled past. The bank's American flag snapped in the breeze. Finally, with hands that only shook slightly, Marcus pulled out his phone and called his son. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Hey Dad, this is a surprise." "Afternoon call?" "Daniel." Marcus's voice came out rougher than he intended. "I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest." "What's wrong?" His son's tone shifted immediately. "What happened?" Marcus told him. Every detail. The weight, Collins's questions, the torn check. The money thrown on the floor. As he spoke, his voice remained steady, factual, like he was describing something that had happened to someone else. When he finished, silence stretched across the miles between Riverside and Atlanta. "Dad," Daniel finally said, and his voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Dad, that's not just unprofessional. That's discrimination. That's a civil rights violation. That's actionable." "I know what it is, son." "Did anyone see? Were there witnesses?" "The whole lobby saw." "Good. Dad, listen to me. Don't do anything else right now. I'm going to make some calls. I have a professor who specializes in banking discrimination. There are federal regulations, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act provisions. We can file complaints with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice." "Daniel, I'm not sure I want to make this into some kind of federal case." "It already is a federal case." Daniel's voice rose. "Dad, you can't let this go. He assaulted your dignity in public. He denied you service based on racist assumptions. And he did it brazenly because he thought he could get away with it." Marcus closed his eyes. "Your grandfather used to tell me something. He said sometimes silence is strength. Sometimes you don't fight fire with fire." "Granddad lived in a different time," Daniel said gently. "This is now. And now, we have laws. We have recourse. You don't have to be silent anymore." "I didn't say I'd be silent," Marcus replied. "I said I'd be strategic. There's a difference." "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to call Pemberton and explain what happened. Get a new check issued. Then I'm going to call the regional office of First Community Bank and file a formal complaint." "That's a start, but Dad." "And then," Marcus continued, "I'm going to wait. Because men like Bradford Collins, they always overreach. They always think they're untouchable. And that's when they make mistakes." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You sound like you're planning something." "I'm planning to get justice, son. The right way. The way that sticks." "I'm coming home this weekend," Daniel decided. "I'll catch a bus Friday night." "You have classes." "Some things are more important than classes. My father's dignity is one of them." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I love you, son. I love you too, Dad." "And Dad? What you did today, keeping your composure, not losing control. That took more strength than fighting back. Granddad would be proud." After they hung up, Marcus made 2 more calls. The first to Pemberton Grain, where a sympathetic accountant immediately agreed to issue a replacement check and expressed shock at what had happened. The second call was to the regional headquarters of First Community Bank, where he was transferred 3 times before finally reaching someone in the corporate compliance office. Her name was Helen Woodbridge, and her voice was professionally neutral, as Marcus explained what had happened. He spoke clearly, without emotion, sticking to facts and timeline. "Mr. Green," she said when he finished, "I'm going to need you to file a formal written complaint. I'll email you the forms. But I want you to know we take these allegations very seriously." "Will anything actually happen?" Marcus asked. "Or will this just be filed away somewhere?" "I can't promise outcomes," Helen said carefully. "But I can promise an investigation. We have protocols for this." "How long does an investigation take?" "Typically, 2 to 3 weeks. However, given the severity of what you're describing, we may expedite. I'll be flagging this for immediate review by our regional director." "Thank you," Marcus said. "Mr. Green. Was there anyone else present who witnessed these events?" "The entire lobby. 6 customers, 3 staff members." "Would you be willing to provide names?" Marcus paused. "I don't want to drag innocent people into this if they'd rather not be involved." "I understand. But witnesses strengthen cases. Significantly." I'll think about it. After the call ended, Marcus started his truck and drove home slowly, taking the long route through farm country. The sight of green fields and working land soothed something in him. This was real. This was honest work. This was what he knew. At 3:42 p.m., 17 minutes after Marcus drove away from First Community Bank, a black sedan with corporate plates pulled into the parking lot. Bradford Collins, standing at his office window with a self-satisfied expression, didn't notice it at first. He was mentally composing what he'd tell Patricia over dinner, framing the incident as him maintaining standards and protecting the bank's integrity. Jennifer Harper noticed the car. She'd been shaken since Marcus left, unable to focus on her work. The image of those bills on the floor kept replaying in her mind. She'd grown up in Riverside, gone to school with Marcus's niece, knew the Green family as hardworking, decent people. What she'd witnessed made her stomach hurt. When three people in business attire emerged from the sedan, Jennifer's pulse quickened. The woman leading them was in her 50s, with short gray hair and a bearing that suggested authority. The two men with her carried leather portfolios. They entered the bank, and the woman approached Jennifer's desk with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good afternoon. I'm Helen Woodbridge, Regional Compliance Director for First Community Bank. These are investigators from our corporate office. We need to speak with Bradford Collins immediately." Jennifer's hands went cold. "Of course. Let me." She glanced toward Collins' office. He'd finally noticed the visitors and was walking toward the lobby, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Miss Woodbridge?" Collins extended his hand, his professional smile firmly in place. "This is unexpected. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared." "This is an unscheduled compliance inspection, Mr. Collins," Helen interrupted crisply. "We won't need preparations. We'll need full access to your records, security footage, staff availability for interviews, and your complete cooperation." Collins' smile faltered. "Of course, absolutely. May I ask what prompted this visit?" "We received a complaint approximately 30 minutes ago. A serious complaint regarding discriminatory practices and customer mistreatment. Given the nature of the allegations and the availability of immediate witnesses, I made the decision to conduct an immediate preliminary investigation." The color drained from Collins's face. There must be some misunderstanding. Who complained? That information is confidential at this stage. What I need from you right now is access to your security camera system. Specifically, footage from the last 90 minutes. Collins's throat worked. "Our security system. It's standard protocol. But I'm not sure I can grant access without proper authorization from Mr. Collins." Helen's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I am your authorization. I am a corporate regional director. I have full authority to conduct this inspection, and I am requesting access to security footage as part of a compliance investigation. You can either provide that access now, or I can have our corporate security team remote access your system and lock you out of it. Which would you prefer?" The lobby had gone silent again. Every staff member was watching. 3 customers had paused their transactions. "Of course," Collins said, his voice strained. "Right this way." The bank's security office was a small room behind the teller stations, containing a computer workstation and several monitors displaying live feeds from 8 cameras positioned throughout the branch. The security system was maintained by a third-party company, and footage was automatically backed up to cloud servers every hour. Helen sat at the workstation while one of her investigators stood behind her, making notes on a tablet. The other investigator remained in the lobby, quietly speaking with Jennifer and other staff members. "I need footage from your office camera and the main lobby camera from 2:30 to 3:30 this afternoon," Helen said. Collins stood in the doorway, his hands clasped behind his back, trying to maintain an air of calm authority. But sweat had begun to bead at his temples. The footage loaded. Helen fast-forwarded to 2:47, when Marcus entered the bank. They watched in compressed time as he approached Jennifer, waited at the desk, then waited longer. Helen glanced at Collins when the wait extended past 10 minutes. "Is it typical for customers with legitimate deposits to wait this long?" she asked mildly. "We were short-staffed," Collins said quickly. "Busy afternoon." The footage showed 3 teller windows open, 2 with no customers at all. Helen said nothing, just continued watching. She slowed the playback when Marcus entered Collins's office. The camera angle showed both men clearly, though there was no audio. They watched Collins examine the check, his body language dismissive. They watched him lean back in his chair, watched the conversation grow heated. Then they watched Collins stand, saw him hold up the check, and saw him tear it in 2. "Jesus," the investigator behind Helen muttered. Helen's face remained impassive. She made a note on her own tablet. The footage continued. They watched Marcus gather the torn pieces, watched him and Collins move into the lobby. The lobby camera had a better angle for what came next. They watched Collins reach for his money clip. They watched him throw bills on the floor. They watched Marcus kneel and gather them while every person in the lobby watched in stunned silence. Mr. Collins, Helen said quietly, pausing the footage, would you like to provide context for what we just observed? Collins's face had gone from pale to red. That customer was acting suspiciously. He had a check for an improbable amount. I had legitimate concerns about the source of the funds. It's my responsibility as branch manager to. Did you run the check through verification? Helen interrupted. No, I was going to. Did you call Pemberton Grain Company to confirm the check's validity? Not yet, but. Did you consult any of our protocols for handling large agricultural payments, which are quite common in rural branches like this one? Silence. Mr. Collins, I need you to understand something. Helen swiveled in the chair to face him directly. I've been with this bank for 23 years. I've investigated dozens of discrimination complaints. Most of them are ambiguous. Maybe something happened, maybe it didn't. Maybe it was discrimination, maybe it was just poor communication. This? She gestured at the frozen screen showing Marcus kneeling on the floor. This is the most clear-cut case I've ever seen. Now wait just a minute, Collins began, his voice rising. You're taking the word of the ferment. I'm taking the evidence of video footage, Helen cut in sharply, which shows you destroying a customer's financial instrument, verbally berating him in public, and throwing money at him like he was a beggar. That's not open to interpretation, Mr. Collins. That happened. One of the other investigators appeared in the doorway. Miss Woodbridge? I've completed preliminary interviews with 3 staff members. They all corroborate the same sequence of events. One of them, Jennifer Harper, also mentions that this isn't the first time she's witnessed Mr. Collins treat black customers differently. Collins exploded. That's ridiculous. I've never. This is character assassination. I have friends in this community, I have connections, I'll have lawyers. You're done speaking, Mr. Collins, Helen said, standing. Her voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending full investigation. You will leave this branch now. You will surrender your keys, your access cards, and your company laptop. You will not contact any staff members or customers. You will not enter any First Community Bank property until this investigation is complete. You can't do this, Collins said, but his voice had lost its force. I've managed this branch for 8 years. My record is spotless. I know the regional vice president personally. The regional vice president is who approved this investigation 15 minutes ago, Helen replied. After I called him directly and described the complaint and the video evidence. Would you like me to conference him in so he can explain your suspension to you personally? Collins' face went through several expressions. Shock, rage, fear, calculation. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys. I want it on record that I completely disagree with this action, he said stiffly. And I'll be consulting with my attorney. That's your right, Helen said. Now please leave. Helen watched through the window as Bradford Collins walked to his Mercedes, his shoulders rigid with barely contained fury. The moment his car pulled out of the parking lot, she returned to the security office and pulled out her phone. She dialed the number Marcus had called from earlier. He answered on the 3rd ring. Mr. Green, this is Helen Woodbridge from First Community Bank Regional Compliance. We spoke earlier. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said cautiously. I wasn't expecting to hear back so quickly. Mr. Green, I'm calling from the Riverside branch. I'm here with a team of investigators, and we've reviewed security footage from this afternoon. I want to apologize to you, personally, and on behalf of this institution, for what happened to you today. What Mr. Collins did was completely unacceptable, and it violated every principle this bank stands for. Marcus was silent for a long moment. I appreciate you saying that. It's more than words, Mr. Green. Mr. Collins has been suspended, effective immediately. He'll be escorted from the premises and will not return. We're launching a full investigation, not just into this incident but into his entire history with this branch. And I'd like to ask if you'd be willing to return to the branch tomorrow. I want to personally ensure you're able to make your deposit, and I want to discuss how we can make this right. Making it right. Marcus's voice was thoughtful. Miss Woodbridge, what happened today wasn't just about me. It was about every black farmer, every black business owner, everyone who's ever walked into a bank and been treated like they don't belong. How do you make that right? Helen closed her eyes briefly. You're absolutely correct. This is bigger than one incident. And honestly, Mr. Green, I don't have a complete answer. But I can tell you what we're going to do immediately. We're implementing mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff. We're reviewing our policies and procedures to ensure they're being applied equitably. And we're establishing a direct line for complaints that bypasses branch managers entirely. That's a start, Marcus said. But I want something else. Name it. I want Mr. Collins prosecuted. Legally. Not just fired, not just suspended. I want charges filed for destruction of property and whatever else applies. Helen took a breath. Mr. Green, I understand your anger. This isn't anger, Marcus interrupted gently. This is accountability. If he'd done this to a check belonging to a white farmer, would you be satisfied with just firing him? Or would there be legal consequences? You're right, Helen said after a moment. I'll contact the local district attorney's office and provide them with all our evidence. What they choose to do is their decision, but I'll make sure they have everything they need. Then I'll come to the bank tomorrow, Marcus said. 10 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Green. And again, I'm deeply sorry for what you experienced. After the call ended, Helen stood in the lobby of the Riverside branch, looking around at the marble floors, the polished counters, the framed photos of community events on the walls. In one photo, Bradford Collins stood with the mayor at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jennifer Harper approached hesitantly. Miss Woodbridge? Can I ask what's going to happen? To the branch, I mean. You're going to have a new manager, Helen said. Someone who understands that banking is about serving the community. All of it. I should have done something, Jennifer said, her voice breaking slightly. When Mr. Green was here, I saw what was happening, and I just stood there. You were in an impossible position, Helen said. But you know what you can do now? You can be a witness. You can tell the truth about what you saw. That matters. By Friday morning, everyone in Riverside had heard about what happened at First Community Bank. Not through any official channels, but the way news always travels in small towns: conversations at the diner, whispers at the post office, phone calls between friends. The story grew slightly with each telling, details embellished or misremembered, but the core remained consistent. Bradford Collins had humiliated Marcus Green, and within an hour, corporate had shown up and fired him. At the Riverside diner, breakfast conversation centered on nothing else. I always knew Collins was an ass, someone said, but I didn't realize he was that bad. Marcus Green is salt of the earth, someone else added. Works harder than anyone I know. What Collins did was disgraceful, but there were other voices too. Quieter, more defensive. Collins was just doing his job. You can't be too careful these days with money laundering. Why are we automatically assuming this is about race? Maybe Marcus really did seem suspicious. Everyone's so quick to cry discrimination. Collins probably just made a mistake. These conversations revealed the town's fault lines, the unspoken divisions that had always existed but were usually polite enough to stay hidden. At the Green farm, Marcus went about his morning routine, checking irrigation, inspecting the soybean field he was preparing for next season, repairing a fence post. Physical work helped him think. Daniel had arrived late Friday night, catching the last bus from Atlanta. He'd sat at the kitchen table while Marcus made eggs and coffee, and they'd talked until past midnight. What do you want from this, Dad? Daniel had asked. Really? If you could have any outcome, what would it be? Marcus had thought about it, stirring his coffee slowly. I want other people not to go through what I went through. I want the next black farmer who walks into that bank to be treated with respect. And I want Bradford Collins to understand, truly understand, that actions have consequences. Now, Saturday morning, as Marcus worked in the barn, organizing tools and cleaning equipment, he heard tires on the gravel driveway. Helen Woodbridge's car pulled up, and she emerged carrying a briefcase. Mr. Green? I hope I'm not intruding. You said 10 o'clock at the bank, but I wanted to speak with you privately first. Come on up to the house, Marcus said, wiping his hands on his work pants. I'll make coffee. In the kitchen, with morning light streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh coffee filling the air, Helen laid out several documents on the table. These are the results of our preliminary investigation, she said. I thought you should see them before we meet at the bank. Mr. Green, what Collins did to you wasn't an isolated incident. We found a pattern stretching back at least 5 years. 14 formal complaints from minority customers, all dismissed by Collins as misunderstandings. Loan applications from qualified Black and Hispanic applicants, denied at rates significantly higher than white applicants with similar credentials. 11 instances of what staff members describe as hostile treatment toward customers of color. Marcus looked at the documents, his jaw tight. And nobody noticed? People noticed. Some of them complained. But Collins was good at covering his tracks. Good at providing alternative explanations. Good at having connections that protected him. Until there was video evidence so clear it couldn't be explained away. So what happens now? Collins is terminated, effective today. He'll receive his final paycheck, and nothing more, no severance, no benefits, continuation. We're also filing a detailed report with federal banking regulators, which could result in him being banned from working in banking entirely. And the district attorney's office has confirmed they're opening a criminal investigation for destruction of property and possible civil rights violations. Will they actually prosecute? Helen met his eyes. I don't know. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Green. Sometimes these cases are hard to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But they have video evidence, they have witnesses, and they have a victim willing to testify. That's more than most cases have. Marcus nodded slowly. And the bank? What changes? I'm personally overseeing the appointment of a new branch manager. We're implementing mandatory quarterly audits of lending practices to check for discrimination. We're establishing a confidential complaint hotline. And we're reaching out to minority-owned businesses and farms in the area to rebuild trust and offer services. That's good, Marcus said. But it's still just policy. Policy doesn't change hearts. No, Helen agreed. It doesn't. But it changes behavior. And sometimes, changed behavior eventually changes hearts. The following Tuesday, Marcus returned to First Community Bank. He wore the same clothes he'd worn the previous Thursday, pressed khakis, white shirt, polished boots. But this time, he brought Daniel with him. They arrived at 10 a.m. precisely. Helen Woodbridge was waiting in the lobby, along with a younger woman Marcus didn't recognize. Mr. Green, thank you for coming, Helen said, shaking his hand warmly, then Daniel's. This is Rebecca Martinez. She's the new branch manager. Rebecca was in her mid-30s, with an easy smile and firm handshake. Mr. Green, it's an honor to meet you. I've heard wonderful things about your farm from the Agricultural Extension Office. I grew up in a farming community myself, so I understand the work that goes into a harvest like yours. They moved to the branch manager's office, no longer Collins's space, but already different. The self-aggrandizing certificates were gone, replaced by community photos and agricultural award plaques. Mr. Green, Rebecca said once they were settled, I want to make sure your deposit is handled perfectly. And I want to discuss some banking options that might benefit your operation. But first, I want to acknowledge what happened to you here. It was wrong, it was harmful, and it should never have occurred. On behalf of this institution and this community, I apologize. Marcus pulled out the replacement check from Pemberton Grain, now slightly creased from being carried in his pocket. I appreciate that, Miss Martinez. I really do. The deposit was processed smoothly, professionally, with none of the scrutiny or suspicion from the week before. Rebecca explained investment options, discussed agricultural loan programs, even mentioned a new banking initiative specifically designed to support minority-owned farms. When it was done, as they stood to leave, Helen touched Marcus's arm gently. Mr. Green, would you consider speaking at our staff training next month? About your experience, about what happened. I think it would be powerful for our employees to hear directly from you. Marcus looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. I'll do it, Marcus said. But not for the bank. For the next person who walks through those doors. So they're treated better than I was. As they left the bank and walked into the afternoon sunshine, Daniel put his arm around his father's shoulders. You know what Granddad would say right now? Daniel asked. What's that? He'd say you did something better than fighting. You made them remember. You made them change. Marcus looked back at the bank, at the American flag snapping in the breeze, at the solid brick building that had stood on this corner for 70 years. I just wanted respect, he said quietly. Just basic human respect. Every person deserves that. And you got more than that, Daniel replied. You got justice. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe just the beginning of justice. Real change takes time. They drove back to the farm, past fields turning golden in the late summer heat, past tractors working distant rows, past the landscape that had defined Marcus's entire life. The humiliation of the previous week hadn't disappeared, he suspected it never would entirely. But it had transformed into something different. Purpose, maybe. Or resolve. That evening, as the sun set over the Chatham River and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus stood at the edge of his barley field. The harvest was complete, but next season would come soon enough. There would be plowing, planting, the eternal cycle of growth and harvest. Daniel came out from the house, bringing 2 glasses of iced tea. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. "Dad?" Daniel said eventually. "I've been thinking. After law school, I might come back to Riverside. Not to farm, we both know that's not my calling. But to practice law. Civil rights law, specifically. There's work to do here." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile in days. "Your grandfather would like that. What about you? What do you like?" "I like that you see a future here worth fighting for," Marcus said. "That's all any parent wants for their kids. To see a better world and believe they can help build it." They clinked their glasses together, ice tinkling, and drank while the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Bradford Collins never apologized. He hired a lawyer, threatened lawsuits, sent angry letters to the local paper about being a victim of reverse discrimination and corporate overreach. Some people believed him. Most didn't. The district attorney eventually filed charges: destruction of property, disorderly conduct, and violation of civil rights statutes. Collins pleaded no contest to reduce charges, and paid a fine. No jail time, but a permanent record. And the banking regulators did indeed ban him from working in any federally insured financial institution. Jennifer Harper became assistant manager at the Riverside branch under Rebecca Martinez's leadership. She never forgot the moment she'd hesitated to act. And she made sure that whenever she saw something wrong after that, she spoke up. The story spread beyond Riverside, picked up by regional newspapers and rural advocacy groups. Marcus gave several interviews, always measured and thoughtful, emphasizing not his own experience but the systemic issues it represented. And at First Community Bank's Riverside branch, they hung a small plaque in the lobby. "We serve everyone with dignity, respect, and justice. No exceptions." It wasn't everything. It wasn't enough to undo centuries of discrimination or erase the damage of racist assumptions. But it was something. A marker, a promise, a small light in the darkness. Marcus Green planted his next crop in the spring, and it grew.